1 year ago, I released a video detailing the ins and outs of Double Special, which I called Destiny's strongest endgame loadout at the time. 12 months later, going into the final shape, many people have approached me asking if what I said back then holds true today. While the game looks a fair bit different than it did before Lightfall, today I'm going to go over how I continue to use almost exclusively Double Special in the content I play. First, let's talk about what's changed since the Witch Queen. One of the big benefits that I mentioned when praising Double Special was its ability to produce extra heavy ammo compared to double primary or single special loadouts. Since then, Bungie has patched this interaction, and now running Double Special no longer buffs your heavy ammo drop rate, which kills a big selling point for many avid Double Special users out there. What else has changed? Well, on the bright side, we've gotten an even more diverse array of special weapons to choose from. More waveframes, even more trace rifles, including some in the kinetic slot now, and even weapons like snipers are getting splash or ammo efficient perks like Discord and kinetic tremors. But the king of them all has to be the rocket sidearm. Not only is this sidearm incredibly ammo efficient with slot leading total damage, excellent perks, and built-in splash capability, but it also progresses ammo counters as a primary, not as a special weapon. Finally, Bungie has also spent the past year buffing various exotic primaries into much more viable states, recognizing how weak primaries have felt in endgame PvE for quite some time. From the universal 40% exotic primary buff and various global weapon type buffs, to the release of brand new powerful options, exotics like Sunshot, Graviton Lance, Quicksilver Storm, and Outbreak Perfected have won over the community's hearts and space in their loadouts. So what does all of this mean for Double Special? In last year's video, I spoke of the two main advantages of Double Special, increased damage output and increased ammo drops. We've established that the latter no longer applies, so is the former still worth it? As expected, the answer is complicated. In the past, I would have argued that Double Special should be considered the default option when trying to play Destiny 2 at your most optimal, with an argument for a primary needing to be made. After all, that's why I titled one of that video's sections Exceptions, because back then, Double Special was good in pretty much everything, except a few cases where a primary could maybe do something two specials couldn't. Today, things are a little different. First, I'd like to start by saying that I generally build loadouts from the activity up, rather than trying to make an inherently strong loadout. As a result, these days, I tend to perceive build crafting as a much more compartmentalized process, with weapons being added or removed on their own merits. It's much more I want weapon A and weapon B, rather than I want primary A and special B. That being said, I did mention how powerful our selection of specials has become, and not by coincidence, that has also impacted what I spend most of my playtime using. When I choose to use weapons in an activity, I pick what best suits the task at hand, and most of the time, two special weapons just end up being the best for the job. We've previously discussed how special weapons tend to be inherently more powerful than primary weapons as a result of sandbox balancing. Limited ammo means that ammo has to pack more of a punch. However, some exotic primaries and even some legendaries are so potent that they make the case that they are better in slot than special weapons. On top of exotic primaries that you choose for utility purposes or champ stunning, be it a Lumina or an unstoppable hand cannon Midnight Coup, some weapons are just so incredibly potent despite their primary status, like the 4 I mentioned in the changes section. So how do you choose? Well, that's what this video is here to help you with. In my opinion, there are 4 major factors that affect the viability of a Double Special loadout in Destiny 2 going into the final shape. Let's go over each one together. First, we have encounter or activity length. If you're doing a raid or dungeon, chances are you'll have access to a rally banner before starting an encounter. And unless you're doing a master raid, Pantheon, or a day 1, chances are you'll probably be done with said encounter in 1 or 2 phases. That means that the likelihood of you running out of ammo drastically decreases. It also means that your total damage and ammo generation matters a lot less, since by the time you expend all of your ammo, the encounter will likely be over. Now, I did say chances are, since some encounters are naturally longer than others, and some bosses have larger health pools than others. For example, if you're doing a Last Wish in 2024, you're much less likely to run into ammo problems compared to if you're doing something like a King's Fall or a Crota's End, where the bosses are a lot tankier. And of course, if you're not doing a dungeon or raid, ammo problems will reveal themselves even sooner if you don't have access to flags to begin with. Second, loadout choices. This is probably the broadest category since it covers anything and everything you choose to use in conjunction with and including your 2 specials. Does your loadout have strong ability ad clear? Well, if you're on Sunbracers and you can kill every single red bar in the activity without spending any ammo at all, then obviously your ammo reserves won't be stressed as much. What about your weapons themselves? Well, if you're running, say, a shotgun and a fusion rifle, that doesn't lend itself well to ammo efficiency since neither of those weapons typically has access to splash ammo efficient ad clear, and neither weapon is generally particularly high on total damage. However, if your loadout uses something like Witherhoard and Indebted Kindness, the story changes. Witherhoard has incredible total damage and versatile functionality, both sticking mages or bosses and blighting the floor beneath enemies, while Indebted Kindness literally bypasses the special weapon limitation of decreased finder progression and heavy drop rates, while itself being an incredibly ammo efficient weapon. Couple that with perks like Lead from Gold and mods like Special Finisher combined with frequent orb sources and stacks on stacks, and you have an easily self-sustaining loop. If you want to run 2 non-scavenger leg mods, then matching one of your specials to your power weapons is also a great way to keep your loadout ammo efficient by doubling up on the ammo yield of a single mod slot. Finally, whether or not you use an exotic power weapon can also impact your decision to use 2 special weapons. Why? Well, most people agree that exotic primaries are worlds away from most legendary primaries. If using something like Galahorn or Dragon's Breath forces you to use a legendary pulse or hand cannon rather than Graviton Lance or Sunshot, that might make you reconsider a decision to run single special over double. Third, we have teammate reliance. Ammo-constrained activities in this game are generally designed for multiple players, and as such, your teammates, or lack thereof, have a big impact on what you might want to use. If you're soloing a dungeon, you're handling 3 times the enemies that a typical fire team would have to handle, and in order to kill the boss, you'll have to expend 3 times the ammo. If you're carrying inexperienced players who cannot effectively ad clear, you'll need to step up and fill the shoes of 2 or maybe even 3 players worth of ad clear. Even if you aren't in an LFG or carry scenario, even the intent of your team or the atmosphere of the activity can matter. If your entire team is on the same page, going for optimal or efficient completions, then being on double special can often be the way to go. Think about Izzy Forbearance as a classic example. On the other hand, if the run is more casual and less committed, then again there's that possibility of needing to pick up some slack or to balance your loadout around the possibility of multiple phases or additional time spent expending ammo. Finally, our fourth factor is activity type. We talked about this a little when we discussed the presence and frequency of rally banners, but there's more to activity type than that. For example, some activities are naturally more ad dense than others. Legend Onslaught is much more ammo intensive than something like Kali, free heavy bricks aside. Some activities force you to space yourself against long-range enemies. Right now, we don't really have any long-range special weapons that are incredibly ammo efficient. Indebted Kindness comes to mind, Cloud Strike is alright, and the various shapes and sizes that grenade launchers come in, they do okay, but nothing on the level of an artifact-backed Polaris or a Graviton. In a similar vein, difficulty or power level also impacts ammo pressure. If it takes your wayframe 2 shots to kill every red bar, it becomes twice as difficult to justify its place in your loadout against a weapon that has no problem shooting forever. And last but not least, if we're on the subject of team activities, the presence of mini-bosses can make or break loadouts as well. I recall having discussions with teammates about the upcoming boss room of GMs we're in the middle of, and talking about how there weren't enough champs to provide ammo generation opportunities. Some power weapon damage strategies become more or less viable depending on whether or not you have mini-bosses between phases to finish or mark with Aeons or Cenotaph. While this doesn't directly impact your special weapon decisions, it can indirectly change whether or not your first 2 weapons need to pick up the slack from the third. After all, if you can afford to be dumping galley-boosted legendary rockets all the time, you don't really need to pick special weapons that are all that ammo efficient. So what's the summary? Should you use double special? Well, in my opinion, it's not as clean cut as it was 1 year ago. First, it really depends on what specials you have access to. You got a good Lead from Gold rocket sidearm? That'll take you most of the way there to the answer being yes in many cases. In other situations, it depends on what ability build you have to back yourself up with. Sunbracers, Combination Blow, and Banner of War grapple melees are often sufficient enough to run literally any weapon alongside their important tools, the Navigator and 1-2 punch shotguns being prime examples. Second, it also comes down to you as a player. If you're willing and comfortable to make your own special and run loadouts to convert armor charge from stable special finisher stacks into damage surges, then you should be more than fine as long as you run a half-decent loadout. In terms of what makes for a half-decent loadout, that partially depends on the activity, but you can use the guidelines from the previous guide to give you some structure to follow. 2 ammo-efficient weapons is fine, 1 plus another for major burst is okay too, but 2 weapons designed for single target damage with no ability ad clear to back it up, that's a no-go. Finally, the answer really depends on your activity context as well. Certain GMs like Battleground Cosmodrome, for example, require excellent team coordination to allow for 3 double special users given the absence of many champions in the boss room. The general rule is, if ammo is tight, you can't use abilities to make up for it, and your teammates can't cover for you, then a primary is probably advisable. Compared to when I made my first double special video, a lot has changed. Not only has the heavy ammo generation buff been removed, but the line between primary and special has continued to blur. As primaries have gained strength with some rivaling special weapons in their potency, while specials have gained ammo efficiency with some literally gaining the ammo properties of primaries, today the term double special holds less exclusive weight than it once did only a short 12 months ago. Today, the focus has really shifted to the weapon itself rather than its ammo type. What color brick you need is only one consideration. The best example is the difference between Indebted Kindness and something like Final Warning. The weapons themselves are both ammo efficient, they're both sidearms, and they're both popular picks for clearing ads. However, when you choose to use either is dictated not by their ammo types, but instead other factors. Need a GM-suitable, spammable weapon that synergizes with Strand? Final Warning is great for that. Need a precise, ranged option that has a bit more punch with less windup and commitment? Indebted Kindness is more suitable. Overall, I think this is a good change for Destiny. Specials shouldn't all feel extremely punishing to use in ammo-starved scenarios, and primary shouldn't have to be played in endgame content via death by 1,000 cuts. As a parting note, I know a lot of you have watched me play content on Double Special and asked me why it seems more difficult when you try to apply the same strategy in an LFG run or something similar. I will say that you guys have the more difficult job. I have access to competent teammates and, more importantly, coordinated teammates. Like we've discussed, the ammo constraints I have are likely looser than yours, so you have to play even more consciously and methodically than I do when using the same loadout. And while it can be difficult, learning these skills will make you a better player in the long run. In the future, we'll talk about the skills you need to pick out weapons from the vast menu we have available at any given time in Destiny's sandbox, but for now, hopefully this video offered some insight into what has changed and what hasn't when it comes to using Double Special going into Year 7 of Destiny 2. If you have any specific questions, feel free to leave a comment down below, but that's it for now. Bye bye.